Masaru Yamamura is a From Software game developer who has worked on the critically acclaimed titles of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3. For Dark Souls, his involvement seems to largely have been level design and item placement, but for Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, he took a step up to working in the gameplay and combat design. Later in his career, he would become a lead game designer for Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice 2019, which, as we all know, is a game that, using the pedagogical terminology, fucks really hard. Then, continuing his trend of creating gameplay loop equivalents to hard drugs, he fully directed Armored Core 6, and the rest is herstory. I have a semi-conspiracy theory that Yamamura is the one sprinkling the pixie dust into the secret sauce. The combat of the titles in Yamamura's portfolio have a bespoke push and pull risk versus reward that encourages the player not only to succeed, but to go above and beyond, to master any and all techniques that engender victory. Rally, parries, weapon arts, deflects, posture, Makiri counters, initial guard, the list goes on and on. In a short interview with Iron Pineapple just before the release of Armored Core 6, Yamamura was asked about his favorite game. He said that recently he had been playing Street Fighter 6 and that coincidentally, Chun-Li was his favorite character, which, I mean, she's only the most popular woman in fighting games, so it's not unexpected. Still, in that we share something small, but significant. That's right, dear viewer, this is a Street Fighter video. Well, mostly, you'll see. It's also a call-out video for Rofo the Germ to finish Armored Core 6, but that's mostly just the subtext. I'm gonna try to make a point. You guys ever try to make a point? Let's do that. Allow me to begin with one of my usual disclaimers and assure you that I do not think I am that great of a player, just for, spoiler alert, reaching Master Rank. I might, at best, have a rough grasp of all the macro fundamentals. Mastery does not come by reaching an arbitrary point threshold in a ranked queue. However, for me, this is a big accomplishment because I never thought I would actually be able to do it. I have broken the Pure Platinum curse, as it were. Master Rank is about averagely good in the grand scheme of Street Fighter 6 players. It's probably the starting point, honestly. You have a good idea of most of the game's systems and can counter most of the common gimmicks, but you've still got a long way to go, which is not to disparage anyone that might be below Master Rank. Learning this game, even at a basic level, takes a very, very long time. Honestly, any fighting game. So why Street Fighter and why Master? After playing against both co-opers and gankers alike, I wanted a game where my opponent and I were on more equal footing. I undertook this project mostly because I wanted to take a step back and go play some games that were specifically engineered with player versus player combat in mind. In 2014, shortly after the release of the Melee documentary by Samox, I picked up competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee, and also the mod for Brawl, known as Project M, during version 3.02, which was extremely popular, catapulting several streaming entities to success. In college, I hosted events at a local card game shop every Saturday night for about 2 years. As of now, our local scene is mostly online, but practically dead. COVID-19 took a toll on a lot of local fighting game communities. I still play Melee, but it's a far cry from what it once was, driving 3 hours down the state to go to some tournament in the middle of nowhere, or driving an hour out to New Jersey to compete in a little shop in a strip mall. There was something about traveling and meeting new people that you don't get from the endless stream of faceless opponents online. I think about that era of my life fondly. Maybe someday I'll become a local TO again, but I'm getting to be 30. I'll leave that for another ambitious young man, or woman, or NB, or other gender identity entirely. Whosoever is willing. Whether you consider Smash a fighting game or not is somewhat irrelevant to me, but I've been interested in Street Fighter for at least 9 or 10 years now. I played Street Fighter V when it came out and had a lot of fun, but honestly, I didn't play all that much ranked, and I was really quite bad at it. I played Karin Kanzuki, who's not terribly different from Chun in some ways. She was fast, had some broken buttons until Capcom reined them in, and instead of a projectile, she had a command dash and Akuma levels of damage. Then Monat came out, and I was too incompetent to do the V-trigger combos and loops, so I mostly gave up on that game. I don't think I ever made it out of bronze, for fear of losing. The Chun-Li of Street Fighter V was fun, but it never really felt like a fully fleshed out version of the character. More like a cardboard cutout, a little lacking in depth around the edges. Street Fighter is a game I play for more or less one or two characters, who usually cover similar niches and archetypes. You see, in any genre of a competitive nature, I gravitate towards a neutral forward character, dry and complex. This is not as popular a style as Chun-Li is a character herself. She is fast, defined as a speed-type character for her quick forward and back walk, though this is where the speed aspect begins and ends. She has long pokes and some of the best frame data in class for many moves, including the all-important crouching forward. This combination of attributes in the better balanced fighting games usually net you at least a high-tier spot. In short, Chun-Li wants to get you into her advantage. Oh my god, who wrote this? This wording is atrocious. Sorry. Chun-Li wants to play footsies. Now I know some of you might know of Street Fighter VI and wonder why I don't play JP or Guile or Dalsim, who are definitely more similar to a zoner or a mage than Chun-Li. And I'll tell you why. You don't play fighting games to throw fireballs. You play them to fight. If I wanted to utterly ignore my opponent, I would play Guilty Gear. Obviously, that's not what JP, Guile, or Dalsim actually do. I'm hyperbolizing. Nevertheless, I find zoners to be a terrible board to play both as and against. And if I wanted to be bored, I would play Mortal Kombat. I bought the deluxe edition of Street Fighter VI for the DLC fighters, despite knowing full well I'll only be playing one character, but that one character is a doozy. Chun sort of has a reputation for being technical. So she has a stance now, which is kind of cool, I guess, though I would be hard-pressed to call it very Chun-Li. In some ways it simplifies her damage routes, and in others it makes them needlessly complicated, but I think I prefer stance cancels to one-frame links. If nothing else, it makes her combo game very flexible, and lets you punish off counter hits and punish counters in ways that are unique to her. So I went into training and picked some simple combos, but I didn't go much deeper than that. I went into ranked and got high gold, then I climbed a bit in plat, but after that I hit a bit of a wall and gave up. Throughout the first year I played on and off, going into training mode for an hour or two here or there, but never really playing other people, not even casually, because I just felt too inadequate. By this point I had put maybe 150 or so hours in, but I hadn't really played the game with that many people, and fighting games are meant to be shared. They're supposed to be fun, ideally, with your friends. In a different life, for some people, fighting games were a sort of monolith, a physical idol in the form of an arcade cabinet around which adherents would congregate and worship, a vessel through which two players could face off against one another. It's fun to fight a computer now and again. I've spent a lot of time playing single-player games, but there's a kind of animal thrill you get from playing other people that a CPU cannot replicate. Now we just scrabble for ranked points. Friends of the channel, Saint Riot and Pingcognito, were streaming their exploits with ranked and hosting lobbies for viewers to come and fight in, which was some of the more fun I've had with a fighting game in a long time. Even if I got my ass handed to me by Draco Kimura and several other high-ranking players. At some point I managed to start climbing again in Platinum, a little after Christmas. I don't really know what prompted this, nor do I know what shift in my mentality enabled me to start winning more than I was losing. But after a while I ended up in Diamond 1. Not even really meaning to. When I got there I thought, oh wow, Master is like a hop, skip, and a Hazanshu away. If I climb half a rank a day, I can do it in 10. It was at this point that I remembered a little-known website I came across at some point when Street Fighter VI was new, the Footsie's Handbook. I had read it through before, but it was more that I skimmed it without really absorbing the information. You know how it is. The Footsie's Handbook is a guide to neutral in Street Fighter, but it uses examples up to Ultra Street Fighter 4. Now you would think maybe something this out of date might not necessarily apply to something like Street Fighter 6, but in truth, Street Fighter hasn't changed all that much since its inception. The core principles are the same. The faces and universal mechanics just get mixed around a little. The goal is always the same. Reduce the other guy's HP bar to 0. How you go about doing that, regardless of the style of fighting game, 2D, 3D, anime fighter, platform fighter, or kusoge, is going to follow a lot of the same rules and restrictions. You want to hit a hurt box with your hitbox and do as much damage as possible, while setting yourself up to do more damage in the next interaction. What I decided to do, being the genius that I am, is to go through each chapter of the Footsie's Handbook and try to implement the lessons of that chapter in some ranked and casual games over the course of a day or so, and then move on to the next one until I finished it. This worked out pretty well until I got to chapter 6 or 7, which became more esoteric or boring. Then I forgot about it after I closed my Firefox session and couldn't get my tabs back. Diamond rank gets tough if you aren't prepared, and I was not. I rose up to Diamond 2 without much effort, then experienced some real resistance. I clawed my way up to Diamond 3 and rested there for about a week, then went up to Diamond 4 pretty steadily. I climbed further than ever before to Diamond 5, and then hesitated.
Hesitation is defeat.
Then, in a foolish, sleep-deprived state after playing the Elden Ring Night Rain network test at 6 a.m., I went on a hilarious losing streak that put me almost back at the beginning of Diamond 3. So I took a week off, I played Bloodborne a bit, and I focused on other things. Also, watch your replays. I watched a bunch of my losses and I couldn't stop saying, I threw that, because of stupid decisions I was making over and over. Then over the course of about 2 weeks, I climbed all the way back up to Diamond 5. For a while, I struggled until I remembered the Footsie's Handbook and decided to try to finish it. And I guess it must have helped, because I did exactly what I set out to do. Then, over several hours on a Saturday, I carefully ascended all the way to Master. Of the 3 Master players I encountered in Diamond 5, I managed to beat 2 of them, which boosted my confidence a bit. I will link the Footsie's Handbook in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Even if you don't play Street Fighter, it's an interesting read. It'll definitely get you thinking about decision-making in a 1v1 environment. Oh, and in the middle of all of this, Mai dropped and I had to learn the matchup on the fly because every third game would be against her. The entire experience was exhausting. It was demoralizing, frustrating, confusing, and anxiety-provoking. Losing arbitrary ranked points instills me with a sort of pointless fear. The fear that if I couldn't just beat this opponent, my climb would take just that much longer. I accepted these losses with grace. I kept thinking to myself, I just want this to be over, and I know the moment it is, I'm going to want to keep playing. Which was not fully true. It took me far too long to understand what was going wrong with my playstyle. Due to my personal preferences and history with fighting games, my tastes are biased towards a particular school of design. In short, Street Fighter VI is not exactly what I prefer, but I strongly believe that it is a good fighting game. Above all else, relatively easy to learn and popular, so there are a lot of people to play with. You aren't going to be running into the same guy who's been playing every day for 12 hours for the last 10 years or whatever. I should also add that Street Fighter VI is probably not good enough to be truly immortal, but it is the version of the game that is alive now, and I think one should play alive games while you have the chance. Time marches ever onward. I could easily go on and on for a very long time about things that are not to my taste, but I must strictly limit my complaining time. The first draft of this script had 2 very long sections about the design flaws inherent to grapplers and zoners alike, but I am cutting it because complaining about my gaming hobby feels a little passé, given the state of, well, everything. I am also cutting a multi-paragraph tirade against the concept of level 3 cutscene supers, as well as a scathing, scandalous review of the drive system. I'll include it in the description somehow. It's quite a few paragraphs, but it just doesn't belong here. Here's my fighting game hot take. Balance is largely overrated. I used to be a stickler for balance when I played Project M because of Zelda, but now I feel like it's sort of not that big of a deal. Yeah, it sucks if the character you like and identify with is bad competitively, but low tiers have existed for time immemorial, and there are definitely low tiers in Street Fighter VI. If your goal is victory, you'll naturally gravitate towards characters with strong mobility, lots of options, and damaging, if not complicated, combos. If you really love fighting games, then you'll pick a character that lets you play the most possible game per scenario, a character that challenges your opponent in the same way that they will challenge you. It's about seeing past the surface presentation or aesthetic and digging into what kind of combat vocabulary you want to use, what sorts of game arguments you will make to claim victory in the debate of neutral, conversion, and punishment. In the age of the internet, there's no shortage of tier lists from, more or less, reputable sources to compare against one another. And using that as a baseline, you can decide on a viable main pretty easily. But none of that really matters, because the only thing that you can control are your own actions. Your performance with your main, low tier or high, is entirely dependent on your preparation, training, drills, and practice in the lab. Most of the greatest fighting games in history, and of the modern day, are broken as all hell. Many of the immortal games that will be played until the end of gaming are all very unbalanced and often glitchy messes. That to me is the human aspect of them. Advanced tech might make the skill floor ludicrously high, with months-long learning to do seemingly simple techniques, but that doesn't mean you won't also need to take months to improve at a modern fighting game. In a given roster, I think mechanical variety triumphs, even if some of the available styles of play err weaker in the trend of a meta. Sometimes smoothing out the edges might make balance better, but it makes round-to-round performance worse. And when I'm playing a fighting game and picking a character, I like to feel that my win condition can be brought about by my choices using a varied yet well-rounded kit, rather than a tailored, streamlined, and airbrushed version of the once sharp and jagged-edged main that I chose initially. Regardless of how advanced your combo game gets, the footsies are still footsies. I like to muse about game verbs and how they are similar between genres. Take the concept of a dash dance, for example. It's a common thing you see in fighting games. This is the same as this, is the same as this, is the same as... well, you get it. Moving unpredictably and with sufficient spacing away from your opponent is the first step to landing a clean hit. Not getting hit is the first part of landing a hit, and landing a hit is how you take a lead. Maintaining a lead puts pressure on your opponent to get aggressive because there's usually a timer, which makes them prone to mistakes. When your opponent makes mistakes, you punish them, and you win. It's deceptively simple. Your hit just has to land. It can be anything, a little poke or a big elaborate combo that wipes out half their health. Mechanically, something like, I don't know, Elden Ring can be easily viewed through the lens of a fighting game. It has health bars and hitboxes, hurt boxes, jumps, dashing, crouching, blocking. The three core differences are 1. Damage differences based on upgrade and stat distribution due to RPG mechanics. 2. Being able to recover health and meter through flasks. And 3. Rolling as the core defensive mechanic as opposed to blocking. Once you know all of that, then you can sort of line up the similarities between something like Street Fighter and like a Souls game. Dagger swings are jabs. Curved sword, straight sword swings are like medium attacks. Great swords and above are fierce punches or roundhouses. They're rarely strong for approaching, but they're great at whiff punishing and trading. Elden Ring halberds break this a little bit because they have like medium to heavy attack power on very reliable running pokes. Weapon skills / Ashes of War are functionally supers. They do a bunch of damage, and there are consistent ways to set many of them up to hit. Sorceries are fireballs, and incantations are other sorts of projectile in general. There are exceptions, since spells are a varied class. There are command grabs, supers, set play traps, and more in here, but in general, spells create hitboxes without the vulnerability of a hurt box. Break bows and ballistas are longer, full-screen pokes, sort of also similar to a fireball. Where this comparison falls apart a bit is the grab component, which is supposed to lose to blocking. Instead, I think it's replaced by the roll-catching component, which beats rolls. There are command grabs in the form of backstabs, inescapable frenzy, and lifesteal fist, as well as the greatsword of damnation. You can kick to break a block, but this is slow and loses badly to backpedaling. Backstabs are not reliable enough to use in combat on a regular basis, but there are situations where a well-placed roll backstab is the perfect solution. Overall, this is probably fine, though I did enjoy the backstab fishing of Dark Souls 3. It was just difficult enough to be rewarding, even if the Hornet Ring damage was excessive. Considering all of this, one might feel more than a little bit foolish as an invader if they show up to a fight against 3 opponents without their jab, or worse yet, without their super. It is one thing to employ unique and underappreciated weapons and attacks, another entirely to have an incomplete or half build because you thought it wasn't important to leave the house without a backup roundhouse kick. I know some will disagree with me and favor role-playing above any semblance of combat efficiency, but that's their prerogative. I like to play the game as it is, not the one I want it to be. Which means that yes, you too can likely force other players into playing your way if you employ enough psychological rigor. Thanks for joining me on my little recounting of my journey and listening to me ramble. A lot of people went back and watched the Geomancer and some other build videos in the wake of Rofo the Germ's most recent Chaos Magma Mage video, which I will link in the description below because it is truly excellent. I'm very grateful for the second wave of compliments from that as well. Here at Pure Platinum Prindustries, we strive to make the most out of molten rock and the spirits of the damned. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make this video, but I thought, why not? I'm going to take a break from climbing and Street Fighter, but I'll probably keep playing here and there. I may pick up a secondary character for shits and giggles, but I don't think I'll ever stick with them like I do Chun-Li. Rivals of Aether 2 came out a few months ago, and I'm rather keen on learning that game too. Looking forward, I may make a video about the Great Blader build in the future, as I have a bunch of leftover clips that I gathered months and months ago. Also perhaps an Armored Core 6 PvP compilation. We'll see. Until then, thank you all again, and have a lovely day, week, month, and year. Take care.